Well, from a jailhouse to a schoolhouse, and now one of the nation's oldest HBCUs. A once enslaved woman turned widow of a notorious slave trader was at the center of it all as a founder of what would become Virginia Union University. This Black History Month, we share the story of Mary Lumpkin and her legacy as the mother of VUU. There's no physical evidence of what was once described as the Devil's Half-Acre. A cruel, dark place of agony and despair for enslaved African-American people, tortured and beaten here at the infamous Lumpkin's jail in Richmond. That jail once existing on a compound owned by the notorious Robert Lumpkin, a man with a brutal reputation for abusing the enslaved.
Many of its those who were enslaved died of disease and mistreatment, and so it was a filthy, grimy place.
Whipping and beating, men and women left to rot in their own excrement.
The site once belonging to Lumpkin's home, jail, and lodging for slave traders in the mid-1800s is now buried beneath mounds of concrete under Interstate 95 in Shacklebottom. Today, visitors are met with these historical markers by Main Street Station.
So Lumpkin Jail became a very important place for two reasons. One, it held those slaves that were considered rebellious, so to speak, so that they would be seasoned, so to speak, or just taken care of in ways that would ship before they go on the domestic slave trade on one.
Among those who survived the unimaginable on Lumpkin's compound, as Richmond reigned as the second largest hub for the U.S. slave trade, an enslaved woman named Mary, who at 13 was forced to bear his 5 children. Among them, Dr. Olivia Huron's great-grandfather, Richard Lumpkin, who she says changed his name.
The name Lumpkin was considered so evil at that time. When I realized that I was really descended from this awful, evil man, I felt that I had to do something with my anger.
She bought this bracelet to rattle off frustration.
If I accept this marvelous woman as my ancestor, or he's my ancestor too. And every time I say it, it breaks my heart that I'm kin to this man. When I get angry, I can just shake it, almost like shaking my fist in his face.
Lumpkin would eventually wed Mary, leaving his land and property to her when he died in 1866, a year after the Civil War ended. But it was what she did shortly after with the property that empowered generations to come. Mrs. Lumpkin leased the former jail to Baptist minister Nathaniel Culver, who needed a site to start a religious school for newly freed African Americans.
It's hard to find land to build an institution to educate African Americans.
What became God's Half-Acre, or Richmond Theological Seminary years later, evolved into Virginia Union University. The school also the result of a merger between 4 institutions, all founded by the American Baptist Home Mission Society. Dr. Cleve Tensley IV, a history professor at VUU, says the school wouldn't exist without Mary Lumpkin.
We always tell the stories of our black male heroes, but we don't hear much about our sheroes, and she was an incredibly courageous woman.
For generations, the university has produced some of the nation's most prominent trailblazers, including America's first black governor, Doug Wilder, and the Richmond 34, students who led a peaceful sit-in at segregated lunch counters in a downtown Richmond department store.
Virginia Union University is the legacy of Mary Lumpkin. But it is also the legacy of every African-American woman that is alive today and has lived and struggled before for her children.
That's Dr. Hakeem Lucas, the university's president. What would you imagine her thoughts would be if she saw all that Virginia Union came to be?
I think ultimately if she was here and she was to see with her eyes in a physical sense all that was done with her obedience to the Great Spirit, I think she would say, yes. Maybe a tear.
She did the best she could with what she had, and the best, look at what the best turned out to be, a whole university.
A university that started in the shadows of our nation's dark history, but saw light and became one for others. And Dr. Huron shared a lot more with me, as you can imagine, about her great-great-grandmother, which we'll get up on NBC12.com very soon for you. Also, this book called The Devil's Half-Acre by Kristen Green is also very enlightening regarding this story. Now, Dr. Huron also tells me that she plans to take Mary's story on the road as a historical reenactment in hopes that more people will learn about her legacy. Remember that you can watch